All right, good afternoon, everyone. Pub members, members of the public, city staff, thanks so much for being here for the first meeting of May of the Portland Utility Board, and we'll go ahead and get started. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. As you just heard, this meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts on anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there's wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We put these principles into action by speaking up and speaking out. Each of us is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we will focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning conduct, but not people. Amy will review some logistics of our meeting.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly walk through the guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, which includes the PUB staff, myself, and Eliza. Please limit your chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak but have not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-hosts may lower your hand once you've begun speaking to maintain the flow of the conversation. During public comment periods, the public can also raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board presenters or facilitators when speaking if desired, but it is not required. Others are asked to leave your videos off. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're using your phone, you can press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with PUB staff or raise your hand during the comment period. It also is available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. I'll pass it back to you, Karen.
Thanks, Amy, and I apologize to everyone. I didn't introduce myself at the opening of the meeting. My name is Karen Williams, and I am one of the co-chairs with Kaliska Day of the Portland Utility Board. So again, welcome. We will start just quick look at our agenda. We will have a public comment period, take a quick look at the April 21st minutes, I believe is what Eliza sent out to us. And then the bulk of our meeting today is going to be making final decisions, I hope, on the recommendations regarding financial assistance, billing, and debt recovery. And we'll cover a few items. We are going to make every effort to start wrapping up at 4:45. At least one person needs to leave at 4:30. So I think it looks like we'll still have quorum, but still we really want to wrap up and end on time today if we can. So before we move into public comment, let's do our usual disclosure of communications. Thank you, Eliza, for making these beautiful slides for these otherwise rather humdrum processes around our public meeting. Does anyone have a disclosure that they would like to announce? Doesn't sound like it. Must have been a quiet month. Thank you, everyone, for considering that. So we now will open our public comment period. I understand there was a request for public comment. And I see Dee White is unmuted. So Dee, please take up to 3 minutes and share your public comment.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great, thanks. Hello, my name is Dee White, and I'm speaking on behalf of Portland Advocates for Lead-Free Drinking Water. Today, I'd like to ask the pub to ask the director of the Water Bureau, where is a comprehensive free water filters program to prevent lead exposure during increased risk because of Portland Water Bureau's action level exceedance from 5 months ago? I'm going to provide the background for this urgent question by quoting from 3 OPB articles that were published in November and January of this year. Quote, the Oregon Health Authority asked the city to provide a plan to reduce lead in drinking water after test results showed the highest lead levels the city has seen in 2 decades. The city's results were far above the EPA's action level of 15 parts per billion, but experts stress there is no safe level of exposure to lead, and 15 parts per billion is a regulatory, not a public health threshold. Lead experts say Portland stands alone as the largest major city consistently surpassing the EPA's threshold. Water engineer Mark Edwards, one of the scientists who brought the world's attention to the water crisis in Flint, recently called the lead levels in Portland worse than Flint because of how long the problem has persisted. Portland Water Bureau leaders say they will speed up the timeline for their new treatment facility and distribute free water filters, end quote. The plant is now online. The Water Bureau is making no promises, but they expect to only improve, not minimize the lead. So again, today, I'd like to ask the pub to ask the Water Bureau director these very important and urgent questions. Where is a comprehensive free water filters program? And why isn't this filters program posted prominently on their website, on water bills, in the local media? Further, we demand free filters now, especially for the vulnerable. Portlanders should not have to wait for a filter for up to 8 weeks while their water is being tested. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Dee White. Thanks for being here. Are there any other public comments? Any other indications, Eliza or Amy, for a public comment today?
We did not receive additional requests.
Very good. All right. So members, please consider the April 21st minutes that were sent out and speak up if you have any corrections or additions to those minutes. Nope. Saw Kale come off mute there. I thought maybe Kale had a comment. Going.
Oh, I don't.
Thanks, Kale. Going once, going twice, going 3 times, hearing no corrections or additions, we'll accept those minutes as presented. Thanks, Eliza. All right, on we go. Picking up where we left off at our meeting a couple of weeks ago. Let's see. Yeah, so we'll just reiterate. Our goal is to walk through. Oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I was just wondering, when somebody from the public makes a request, as Dee White just did, what is officially the pub's way of recognizing that in some fashion? In other words, to say we'll put it on our list or something like that. What is the appropriate way to respond other than not responding at all? Or is that the appropriate thing to do, just not respond?
Sure, Tom, that's a great question. So the purpose of the public comment is for us as a board to hear comments from, recommendations from, concerns of the public. We are not compelled to respond in the moment or respond at all at the time of the public comment. We certainly can consider the comments that were left and discuss and deliberate upon them at a future meeting, placing discussion of the item on a future agenda. And I will say that, in fact, that particular topic is on our agenda for our next meeting in a couple of weeks. And I see Julia's got her hand raised, so I will certainly let Julia speak to the work that Julia has been doing. But recall that in some of our read ahead material for there's read ahead material for other meetings. We have seen a draft memo to the board that Julia has compiled and regarding lead, and we will be having that discussion at our next meeting. So Julia, why don't you go ahead and add anything you'd like to there?
I clicked on the unmute button. It didn't work for some reason. You said most of what I was going to say. I am going to be doing an update to that memo just based on a little bit further reflection and new information. So you'll get an updated version of, or maybe like more of an additional addendum before that meeting. And I think it will actually, how to respond and moving forward, I think will really help be informed by that discussion that we have when we review that memo and what we want to do moving forward. So I do feel like we will be addressing a lot of these concerns.
Robin, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is kind of jumping off of what Tom was mentioning about what we can do with public comment. And yeah, just in my year here, I've noticed that the public comment portion kind of gets lost just in the idea, just because it's at the beginning of the meeting and we don't have that obligation to necessarily respond immediately. And so maybe one way that we can remain focused on really listening to the public comment would maybe be like after each of our public meetings, like an email follow-up that specifically states what the public comment period brought up. And that way, maybe we can it'll allow us to specifically kind of focus some of our attention on answering those questions and bringing them to the next meeting. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure ways that we can really show that we value that public comment period and have time to actually reflect on it, because currently I just feel like it gets a little bit lost in the mix.
Cale, please go ahead.
And that's all.
Yes, I completely agree with Robin there, although I would suggest that with public comments, they usually submit them before the actual meeting. So I think if we can see if we can find someone or have someone respond, not particularly during that comment, and limiting or prohibiting back and forth conversation, but maybe having someone from the Bureau respond to the question so that they can be answered and receive some sort of affirmation that that they've been heard. I feel like it's different if the board or the staff respond, because I think they're asking like this particular questions. I also recognize that other folks have asked of specific people within the board to answer, and I recognize the director might not be able to answer to every single question, but maybe if someone gather up something that represents the board or the director, kind of answer some of those questions.
Sarah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sarah Messier from the Portland Water Bureau and ex officio member here on the board. I'm not going to weigh in on how to address public comment in general. I do want to, as my role in the Water Bureau, as you all are probably aware at this point, is I do a lot of work with lead and water, and I think we had a similar public comment a few weeks back about our filter program, and I responded to that one. So I can provide some information about our filter program here. We are distributing free filters to folks that have tested their water through our various programs and have elevated levels of lead. We let folks know by who are eligible for that through the mail, through calling them directly. So we are definitely doing the work and getting filters out to folks who need them at this moment. So if there are any further questions about our filter program, I'm more than welcome to answer those from the pub.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think, again, since this is going to be the, if not main, one of the major topics that we're planning on discussing at our next meeting, I think, Sarah, having you standing by and ready to answer questions as they come up next month is going to, or at our next meeting is going to be super valuable. So thanks so much. Okay, very good. Let's move on with Tom.
I'm sorry, I know you're trying to get to the agenda. I just want to say thank you, Sarah, for saying what you've said, and everybody else for what you said, because to me that gives Dee White an answer that we've got it on our agenda. Sarah says they're doing it. We're going to talk more about it at a future meeting. And if we could have just said that at the very beginning, that would have been great. But I'm glad we went through this discussion and everything. And I will now be quiet so we can get on to the agenda.
Okay, financial assistance, billing and debt recovery recommendations. So our goal is to continue walking through the list of recommendations that we had sort of brainstormed on and discussed and talked about over the last several months. Most recently, at our last meeting, we got through sort of the second round of issues and had some great discussions, got to some agreement, straw polls at least, on levels of support. And I think we have about half a dozen or so left to go through today. And just as a reminder, we can use these recommendations in any number of ways, and we can use them more than once. We can pull them together in a communication, a memo that goes directly to council and bureau leadership. And we can do all of these things, actually. It's not an or, it's an and. We can use them as talking points for an annual work session, yet to be scheduled with council. And we can also reiterate them or summarize them or attach them to our annual report, which we'll be working on in a few months over the summer. So just a little background for how we will use these recommendations moving forward. Okay, I think we're ready for moving into them. So when we last left our heroes, we were at number 11. So I think we were sort of partway through discussing number 12. And Amy sharing her screen now. We are looking at wrapping up our discussions on a recommendation to the bureaus not to shut off water for lack of payment. And just as a recollection, what those three color columns indicate, the first is level of support for including this recommendation. I think the second was a no, didn't wish to include the recommendation. Third column was, I'm not quite sure. I'm sort of neutral on this. I can live with it, I believe. And then the last column was, I really need to talk about it. Yeah. Yes, no, pass, discuss. So, so this one seemed to have, again, this, I recognize this was many months ago that we talked about this, but the concept of not using water shutoffs punitively for lack of payment was something that recommendation had a lot of support. And at the time, I'm not sure if you remember who you were, one person discussed at that time that they wanted to discuss that. So anything else that we would like, that people have questions about, have concerns about, or want to talk about? Or are we ready to say we have enough support to leave this recommendation and go on to number 14? I'm not sure what happened to 13. Take a moment to scan through the discussion we had last time and see if anyone has anything to add. Tom?
Well, as I'm looking at this and I've read it in advance, I was wondering if we would want to make a distinction between commercial and residential. Would we say, for instance, do we want to say do not shut off water due to lack of payment, period, which then would include everybody? Or do we want to focus on single family and multifamily residential, or any kind of situation where the people are sort of, it's not like a business, I guess what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know if we actually talked about that, but that thing down at the bottom about the commercial threshold, and am I understanding that correctly, that if somebody owes, that Water Bureau is changing it so if you owe $500 or more, you could be shut off versus $3,000 or more? Is that what that means? Does somebody know?
That was my, yeah, I was going
I
to
was
say.
just saying, Water Bureau staff, if you can certainly raise your hand if you're, those of you that are present in the meeting, if you want to clarify that.
Hey, this is Kale. I think the issue we had, vaguely recall, is the lowering commercial thresholds of shutoffs from 3,000 to 500. I think we wanted to avoid harming small businesses, and so that they should be, if they want to lower the threshold for shutoffs, to make sure that it doesn't affect small businesses, doesn't impact small businesses, unfortunately. I think for small businesses, 500 is too little.
Okay, so are you saying you'd prefer to just leave it 3,000 or recommend that they leave it 3,000 because it looks like they've already changed it?
Yeah, I'd say 3,000 would be reasonable. But the larger business, big corp, I think that is something that if they want to lower it, they can consider, because I kind of feel like they can afford to.
Sorry to interrupt, Kale. I just, somebody is unmuted and I just wanted to ask that they mute. It seems like that has happened. Okay, so Tom, Kale, thanks for those points. I too recall that we had, that was brought up at the last meeting, so it may be in a different, it may have not been in this exact place where we were talking about recommendation number 12, but potential impact on small business and recognition that perhaps a different level of threshold, higher than 500, we would recommend that be considered. So thanks for bringing us back to that.
So Karen, then that would mean that when we say do not shut off water due to lack of payment, as it's written next to number 12, that we would want to distinguish that that is talking about residential, not commercial, because we're saying here that we want them to leave the threshold at 3,000, which means at over 3,000, they will shut off the water. So I just want to clarify that, and I don't know if Eliza could modify this as we go so that we look at the language we're talking about as being the wording that we want to use relative to this recommendation. So in other words, it seems we need to modify do not shut off water due to lack of payment for residential properties. If that, and I think that's what we're saying. Is that what everybody else is thinking as well? Is my basic question.
Okay, I see Karen Spencer has a hand up.
I have a feeling I'm probably going to be one of the lone dissenters on this one. So for the commercial piece of it, there's so many small businesses that are, basically eking by an existence for their owners that I suspect, and I'd like to hear from the bureaus on this. I suspect the reason behind this is that once you get to such a large number, like 3,000, it can be really difficult to catch up. And so if you can try to keep the amount owed small enough, then people don't dig in a bigger and bigger hole. And so we might be doing folks a disservice by having the higher threshold, a much higher threshold.
Julia?
Yeah, following up to what Karen said, and this is why going through this document takes so incredibly long, and I apologize, but it's like, I hear what she's saying completely, and I feel like we've probably had this answer before. I just need a refresher, but like at the Water Bureau, if folks have like a large amount owed like that, and they're on some kind of payment plan, even if it's some minimal amount of money per month, like whatever they say they can afford, $100, $50, $25, like, is that something that the city allows to avoid a shut off?
And Julia, to just clarify, you're referring to residential customers now, or are you referring to both?
Both, absolutely both. Yeah.
Residential and commercial?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I mean, people are like, just like Karen said, a lot of folks who own businesses are, it's hard to be a small business. The margins are tiny.
Okay, before I go to Kale, can I turn to Water Bureau staff to refresh our memories if the allowance that if you pay anything, then you won't have your water shut off. If you're making an effort to pay, does that apply to both residential and commercial accounts? Are there any Water Bureau that could remind us of that?
Cecilia or Sarah Santner, do you happen to know?
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Santner. I was hoping Cecilia would take this one because I'm not 100% certain. My name is Sarah Santner. I'm the Water Efficiency and Affordability Manager for the Bureau. I've met some of you in the past. Hello.
Hello.
I believe the answer is if someone is in a payment arrangement, then they would not be shut off. I'm not 100% certain of that, so I think Jamie and I could get back to you, but Cecilia is probably here and may be able to answer that.
And I think the other part of that question also is it made abundantly clear to people before their water is shut off that if they are on a payment plan and making at least any effort at all, that's the other thing too, is like if it's available, but it's not being communicated to them, then that's also not adequate, right? So it's like, my opinion on this is really contingent on how clear we are about a payment plan being an option if a payment plan is an option, and if it is really genuinely like whatever level they say they can afford. Because at that point, shutoffs would only apply to people who are genuinely like not willing to pay. You know what I mean? I don't like, or maybe I just, that's what I'm trying to wrap my mind around is like, yeah, is it possible and is it clearly communicated?
Julia, this is Cecilia Hume with the Portland Water Bureau Finance Director. The answer to your first question, if customers are on a payment plan or arrangement, they're not shut off. And I believe that also applies to commercial accounts, but we can certainly confirm that. And as far as your follow-up comment about, you know, how widely is that understood by our customer? It is, you know, when the customer contacts us, we work with them to make sure that they understand any payment arrangement that we can set up with them will prevent the shutoff. So we work with every customer that we talk to, you know, before we shut them off. So, you know, when it gets to the shutoff, it's primarily because they haven't talked to us, you know, after, you know, multiple efforts by the Bureau to contact the customer. And if they aren't just paying, to your point.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's important.
Absolutely.
Teresa.
Hi, I'm just curious about, you know, how with $500, it does seem like a very low amount. Like, so I'm curious, how much does a small business typically accumulate within, say, like a month? Like, is that like 1 month's worth of water bill, or is that maybe 3 months? Because if a business can easily get to 500 within a month, that does seem like a very low threshold. Although I also see the point where Karen Spencer pointed out is that if we allow too big of a threshold, it could easily put them into a debt trap. So I feel like there could be a better number between 500 and 3,000. Again, like, we want to assume that there's always ample notifications beforehand, but sometimes we just worry that that doesn't necessarily get to every one of them, especially if they are small businesses that are operated by people with limited English speaking abilities. So that's the part that I'm also worried about.
Okay, before we go to Tom and Robin, is Teresa's question about sort of how much debt a small or a business is carrying? Is there anyone that could speak to that, or is that something that we'll need to get an answer back in writing a little later?
This is Sarah Santner. So in my work in water efficiency and having worked with a number of small businesses through SPUR, a small business is typically still billed quarterly. So just so y'all know that, most of our small businesses are billed quarterly. And they certainly could. It really depends on what kind of business. If it's a small consulting firm and they just have one bathroom, they're probably not going to get to $500 in cost for a month, whether it's a bill or not. If you run a restaurant, if you're a small business restaurant, it could very easily, between the water, sewer, extra strength sewer charges, and storm, get to $500 in cost a month. So if you want more specifics than that, sure, we can get back to you, but that is just a summary.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that. All right, I think it goes Robin, Tom, Kale. So Robin, go ahead.
This is Robin. I just wanted to say I actually think Tom was ahead of me.
Oh, go ahead, Robin. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Then my comment is just, I think this is the right point, just to remind the board that at our last meeting, there was an audit that was provided that told us that the collections throughout the city, like the collections process throughout the city was really disjointed and often ignored the needs of non-English speakers. And so whatever we recommend for reinstating or changing that collection amount, I think we really need to also specifically speak that if they are going to restart collections, that they are focusing on multi-language like material to actually send out, because there is just such a disconnect between actual access to essentially actual access, when a lot of the collections are in English and they lack directions on how to get information in a foreign language.
Okay,
Yeah,
should I go?
go ahead, Tom. I just want to, well, actually, go ahead and we'll go Tom and then Kale, and then I have a suggestion.
I would just like to suggest, because I recognize everybody's contributions here make a lot of sense, but yet we are not able to come to an understanding of exactly what to do. I suspect because most of us don't know exactly what the Water Bureau knows in why they changed from 3,000 to 500. So I think it'd be great if the Water Bureau could give us an explanation or a copy of the report or the study that brought them to make the decision to go from 3 to 5, so that we can understand where they're coming from. Which I don't know that anybody at the meeting right now has that information, but maybe we could get that.
Tom, this is Sarah. I will say that our customer service department isn't represented today, so that seems like one we should consult with them on and get back to you.
Thank you.
Kale, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same thing along lines with mine will be quick. The only thing I would recommend that there be, rather than just lowering it, that there be some sort of established diversion period, established diversion process with a established time frame before we consider any types of cutoff. So having a clear diversion process prior to.
Kale, would you mind explaining what a diversion process is, or an example of what that would be?
Well, I am kind of conceptualizing as a diversion process. Like, for example, maybe in the first month, or in businesses in the first quarter, they receive a bill and they're not able to pay the bill. So maybe that diversion process could begin with reaching out and kind of asking and offering services and help. And then, if they decline, then you go to the second month, and then maybe if they're still not able to pay the bill, then reaching out and saying, okay, would you consider a payment plan? Otherwise, we would have to start thinking about a shut off. And they receive another bill, and then the third bill, you say, okay, so we're not sure what is going on. Can we provide you with help, support, language, so you can take advantage of this, so you don't get shut off. And if there's no, they go, okay, they participate, and then there's still issues in the next month or the next billing cycle, however you establish that, and they're still not able to, then you proceed with the notice to shut off, and then shutting it off. So a diversion, just establishing a process to where we're making intentional attempts to help divert that shut-off notice or that shut-off. Does that help a little bit?
It looks like Amy was typing away there or Eliza, I'm not sure who's doing the active typing, but thank you to get a little bit more detail. So thanks, Kelly. That was helpful for me to understand.
This is Eliza. I'm going to chime in really quick because Cecilia got an answer for you all. So Cecilia let me know that customers are not shut off if they're on a payment arrangement, and that does include the commercial accounts.
Great. Thank you for that confirmation, Cecilia and Eliza. I'm going to go to Sarah and Julia, but I just want to throw out an observation on this particular recommendation that we're discussing. What I'm hearing is a lot of concerns about how information is communicated and to whom it's communicated, and the frequency and the methods of that communication. I'm not, and it's complicated, right? So the number 12 recommendation is a bit black and white the way it's written. So my suggestion would be that if we want to move forward with including this recommendation, that we generalize it somewhat, recognize the complexities of the processes around how and when and if to use water shutoff as a tool for payment, and that we really, the pub's main concern, or one of the main concerns, is in just excellent, frequent, responsive, and culturally appropriate communications that are getting assistance information to people so that they're aware of, you know, what their options are, so they can make, you know, informed decisions. It's a bit of reflection back on what I'm hearing, and let's go to Sarah and then Julia.
Hey everyone, Sarah Messier from the Portland Water Bureau again. I definitely support what Karen just said, but I want to speak to Kale's comment. So I work for the Water Bureau, and I am a bill paying customer as well. So I pulled up my most recent bill, and on the back of it, we have information. We have a section titled "Having Trouble Paying Your Bill." It includes information about setting up payment arrangements in our financial assistance program. And then it has a section about a typical billing and collection cycle. So it says, you know, day 0 is the bill date. And then it goes all the way through for late charges, all the way through to when a shutoff would be considered. So that information that Kale was looking for is right on the back of the bill. So every time someone gets a bill, they can see that information.
Thank you, Sarah. But I was speaking more towards let's say you get that more defined. So let's say maybe you get like an extra page and it says, here is the process. If you do not answer within 30 days or taken care of, then this is the next step that follows. So I didn't think of like any specific detail to include in that notification. I think it's really important to make aware of like each step of the process, each step of, you know, the options in the next process, and, you know, with exact time frame. So with those bills, I do see that after a certain amount of days, and I see those threats of shutoffs and all that. But I don't see that diversion piece. And the diversion really is to take that approach where we're going to try to work with you to help you pay the bill, as opposed to we're going to threaten you to pay the bill. So that was kind of somewhat my point. I just kind of threw out a simple example, but I could see how you're reading it because the letter kind of tells you that. But I think there should be like a more detailed process.
All right, thanks, Kale. I think we heard that loud and clear. Thanks, Sarah, for the details, and Kale for the reiterating your recommendation. Julia, then Cecilia, did you have something you wanted to respond there?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to Sarah's comment about information on our collection. As we send out each reminder notice, we are asking the customers to contact the Bureau. And we do work with all of our customers, again, as long as they call us, to put them onto a payment arrangement to I guess as Kale put it, divert the customer from having their water shut off. So, the letter goes out as a reminder to let folks know that their bills are overdue. And it provides information on, what the Bureau can offer and to call the Bureau. The subsequent letter, if they don't respond to that, there is yet another notice that sends out after so many days, and more information is provided. Again, our phone number is on there for the customers to call us. As long as the customer calls us, we are working with every one of them to help them set up a payment arrangement so that their water service will not be shut off. So I'm not sure, Kyle, if that's what you're proposing, because we do have a process laid out that, after so many days of non-payment, a reminder notice goes out. After so many days of non-payment or response from the customer, another notice goes out. So we have multiple attempts to try to reach our customer to inform them of that they're behind or late with their payment way prior to actual shut off. And that only happens if we're not hearing from the customer.
Yes, I think any type of diversion process should consider having
Kale,
somebody.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kale. Can I just ask you to hold that for a second so we can hear from Julia and Tom? And then if you want to make an additional, have an additional question or want to make an additional clarification, that would be great. Okay, let's go to Julia.
Yeah, I was really glad that you spoke up, Cecilia, because that was what I thought I heard from you, was that there is some level of like additional communication, multiple touches prior to shut off happening. It wasn't clear to me until you laid it out again that they have to proactively reach out to you to get on a payment plan and set that up, that we're in terms of like, we're not calling them or like in that we are proactively reaching out in terms of a mail. My only concern is what Robin brought up, which is like, if they're not English speaking people and they're only getting that notification in English, that might be a barrier to them understanding that they could get themselves on a payment plan. So I'm like wondering what we're doing to try to because I could totally see that being a potential barrier to the written communication. And I also just kind of wonder if it's kind of like when someone sends me an email and I don't see it in a timely manner and they think I'm like a bad person or ignoring them, but it's like sometimes a phone call is like a really helpful thing. So anyway, it's good. I wonder if we want to explore if there needs to be like an actual additional touch beyond just mail to try to get them on a payment plan before water shut off, especially knowing that language might be a barrier. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that there is a multiple step process, because that's what I thought you'd said earlier. That was good clarification.
Okay, I have to admit I've lost track, but I think it goes Tom, Robin, and then back to Kale.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. So as this conversation goes on, it's really reminding me of a couple things. One is that my neighbor across the street was an elderly woman who did not have, I don't know how to say it, she wasn't very organized. And I told this story maybe a year ago or something, but her name was Judy, and she could not handle any of her bills, her taxes or anybody. Everybody showed everybody money. And so the Water Bureau came out and they had, it was a staff person and he was ready to turn off her water. And I was in the kitchen and I looked out the window and ran out there and talked to the man. And he was very nice. And I told him, you're not going to turn the water off, are you? And he goes, yeah, I'm here to turn the water off. Or she's not, whoever's in there is not talking to us. And I said, yeah, well, Judy doesn't talk to anybody, and anyway, so ultimately the county helped Judy and she found housing and somewhere else to live. But in the meantime, there's a lien on her house and everything else. So I still have to go back to what I said last meeting, is that as I think about this, I think it's such a, I just don't like it. It's just not a nice thing to do for human beings to do to other human beings as it relates to this most essential element of our lives, which is water. And I just can't bring myself to have a discussion about how many times you have to go out there and let them know before you shut their water off. I think you need to talk to them and definitely tell them there's going to be a lien on their property. I don't know why Water Bureau can't do like all the other bureaus and put liens on property and use that. It just sounds so it just is not nice. It's not nice the way we should treat each other about something like this. This is water. So anyway, thank you.
Robin?
Yeah, this is Robin. I think I just wanted to highlight that the last couple, just the last couple of last couple of bits of commentary that a couple of people have made, I feel that we're really viewing this repayment or like cutoff through the lens of how a single family residence would be impacted by a water shut off. And I just wanted to make that note that like currently people who live in single family residence, they have direct financial assistance within the Bureau, and that apartment renters often have third party, like there's a third party person involved in their water distribution. And so they, through the current system, renters of apartments are referred to, I think, Home Forward, which is a third-party nonprofit, in order to open up a case. And renters essentially have to be at risk of eviction in order to receive third-party assistance. And so we just need to be mindful that as we discuss turning off, like possibly shutting off people's water, that we're not specifically acting as if everyone who gets a water bill has equal access to financial assistance, because many of the people who are routinely, like renters, apartment renters are commonly low income. And so there's just not an equal division of support amongst people who rent a single family home and those who rent an apartment building. And I just wanted to clarify that. And I think it was stated previously that landlords of multifamily units are given heads up when it comes to like, hey, the water, like, hey, your bill is late. But that eventually renters are notified if there's going to be a shut off. And so there is a lag time between renters of apartments knowing that this bill is past due in comparison to people who have their water directly billed to them.
Kale, please go ahead, and then I have another suggestion.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of clarify my proposal, and then my intent was not to say that there wasn't a diversion process. I recognize that the diversion process includes sending out letters. I've received those before. I'm well aware of those. And the only call that you really get is the one that says, hey, you pay or you get shut off. What I was suggesting is a diversion process with a more personal approach, because in practice, if you can't pay your bill the first month, okay, and they see your letter and they open the bill and they're not going to read through the letters and see what is being offered. They'll see that larger bill and they're just going to chuck it. And if they're still not able into the third month, they're not even going to look at the bill. They're just going to see it, open it, and chuck it. Because they can't pay it anyways. That's how it really works when you can't pay. I've kind of gone when I was in college and earlier in my life, I did the same exact thing. When you can't pay it, you can't pay it. What's the point? But having somebody maybe try and contact me and talk about, hey, sorry, you're struggling, and kind of just that more empathetic approach, and sharing what is available, like there is help. I think the diversion process needs to include some of that, because I can still go out into the community and ask people if they were aware that there are financial assistance to help with, that there's financial assistance to help with the bill. They will tell you no. And for one reason or another, that information isn't going to get put out if we don't take that more personal approach. So I think what we need to do is kind of change what we currently do in our perspective in saying, hey, let's do the best we can. I recognize that shutoffs are going to be a part of it. We can't continue to have people continue to use, but I think we should kind of try to do our best to put all the stops there.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all those just incredibly thoughtful and important discussion points on this very complicated topic. So here's my suggestion. What I am hearing, again, is that we have a lot of concerns, and I think it's fair to say aversion to using water shutoffs as a tool for payment. So I think in our recommendation, we could say that and agree with the city's policy, the Bureau's policy of water shutoffs being absolutely a last resort, if they're a resort at all. And then what I'm hearing is that our concerns about how moving away from using water shutoffs as a tool, how that is done, focus on the for commercial accounts that they be as responsive to the concerns of smaller businesses, that if there is a threshold, that be established at a place that can be demonstrated to be effective in incentivizing payment, but not overburdening a business with excessive debt. I'm hearing that, again, in addition to the concern about using water shutoffs at all, is that the communications around financial assistance that precede a water shutoff are really where we would like the city to focus its efforts and its improvements. And that can mean a range of things. That can mean the frequency of the communication, that can mean targeting communication, that can mean, again, culturally responsive communication, but our recommendations are that it be humane, respectful, effective, conveying the right information that people can access and understand, and that at the end of the day, all of this is about helping people pay their bills. So again, I'm reflecting back what I've been hearing from all of you. And my question to you all is, can we move forward with this recommendation and allude to all the complexities that I just walked through, that you all have been walking through? Yeah, that's my suggestion. Can we move forward with the recommendation and summarize all the issues that we've been talking about as something that we want the city to really consider and continue to improve on their policies around these communications? So think about that for a second. Let me just glance at a note here.
I feel like that was a really good
Right.
synopsis, by the way. Like you did a weirdly good job of capturing it, in my opinion.
I've been trying to take notes as I'm listening to you all. Okay.
You're getting a thumbs up from Robin and a applause from Karen Spencer.
Okay.
Yeah, it was impressive.
Oh, yep, and more thumbs up from Gabby, from Amy Tomowitz.
I would just like to add that I agree with that, Karen. I thought you did a really good job of summarizing that, but I'd like to see how it looks in writing. So Amy and Eliza, let's see or who's ever going to put this into writing as to what the wording actually is, so that then we truly know, has all of our issues or most of them been captured in what the recommendation actually looks like.
And thank you, Tom. And I think this is a good point to remind folks that we at this point, this conversation deliberation we're having, we are not crafting a written document. We are crafting concepts, recommendations that will be used in written or verbal presentations later. So any talking points that came out of this, any written communications that came out of these are going to come back to you all, to us all, for approval before they go anywhere. So I hear you, Tom, for sure. And I just wanted to remind folks that we don't necessarily have to have perfect words today, but we do have to have a pretty good agreement on concepts.
Yeah, and this is Amy. I did not capture while Karen, I'm doing most of the note taking, because while we're also capturing notes, we're also managing some of the back channel chats at the same time. And Karen was very eloquent while she was speaking, and I could not capture the words fast enough. And so I didn't attempt to, because we have the recording and we'll have to go back and capture it. We will capture it better after the fact. And Eliza was also doing back channel communication at the same time. And so we were not able to capture it in real time. So we would have to do that after the fact. So, yeah. So I can't capture it in writing right in this moment. But as Karen said, any written documents that would be coming later and would be coming before the board at the point at which we would be finalizing those written documents down the road, when we're preparing for the work session, when we're finalizing a written document. So this is more to capture the concepts that are being discussed, not the specific language.
But you will put the concepts into some kind of wording so that we'll be able to look at it in the future.
Yes.
Okay. And this wording that then we'll look at together, and if we all agree, then that will be the pub's position on that particular issue. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great.
Okie dokie. Are we ready to move on to the next recommendation? Okay. Okay, so this recommendation was around incentives, and a prior discussion we had about this, there was some concern about whether or not an incentive being, I believe it was, essentially a discount. Like if you pay a little bit, this amount of your bill might be forgiven. I believe that was the concept. And there was some conversation about whether or not that was allowed, hence our potential recommendation to explore this concept with the city attorney. And right, and okay, so that, I think enough said on that to bring us back to where we left this conversation.
And on the right-hand column, when we're not typing, that's actually contains an update from the Water Bureau. So in this case, the payment, this may be a recommendation that you all at this point consider moot, because the payment match program pilot may actually be sort of meeting the intention of this recommendation.
Exactly. Thanks, Eliza. And my recollection was that the match program, that the funding that was allowed for that is fully expended. So our recommendation could be, if you all still would like to sort of keep the sort of elements of number 14, was explore options to find more funding for programs such as the match program that was deployed in March and April, I believe, of this year.
In fact, at your April 21st meeting, this is hard to track you all, so you all are doing an amazing job. But at your April 21st meeting, you actually already expressed support for trying to get more funding for both the Afloat program and the match program.
I thought that sounded familiar. Okay, thank you.
So I think you, and if anybody objects, I think you're actually done with 14. It's just a reiteration that you support in getting more funding for those programs.
Good. Thank you. And so are people okay? I mean, there was, again, I'm looking in the pink and the yellow and the blue columns on this recommendation. So again, the objection I need to discuss, again, that may be moot since, as Eliza just reminded us, we sort of talked about this concept at the last meeting. But I just want to give a little bit of space in case the individual who may have objected to this concept or wanted to discuss this concept, I want to just make sure there's space for you to speak up if you have questions. Okay, I am not seeing that anyone does. So cool, let's move on to 17. And this may be similar because this again is about forgiving debt, value statement that acknowledges the need to balance the value of writing off debt with the value of not increasing rates and providing increased levels of service and continuing with planned improvements on schedule. And we had an update, sort of a general statement that $16 million in debt, if none of that was paid, then that would increase rates. We don't, I'm not recalling that there was a specific, or that there was information available to have a specific, how much would the rate increase if none of this was paid back. I vaguely recall there might've been a question around that. Could we actually see, if 16 million wasn't paid back, how much could that potentially affect rates? But I think we're all on the same page that it would affect rates in some way, some measurable way. So with that, I guess, again, there was not a lot of support. Well, I mean, relatively. Well, maybe that's not true. 5 folks were in support. 3 folks said, I can live with it. And nobody objected. So I shouldn't say there wasn't a lot of support. So if we were to, I mean, essentially this is a recommendation, if there is debt forgiveness to, just encourage the balance in the effect that could have on rates, what services may be adversely impacted if the debts aren't collected, and there just needs to be a balance among all those things. I think we've said that kind of in different ways in some of the communications, like our budget letter. I think we said something similar to that as well. Any other, are people okay moving on, leaving this as a general recommendation?
Do you all want to give Karen a thumbs up if you're okay with it as a general recommendation? Got a thumbs up from a couple people.
General recommendation being striving for balance, which is easy to recommend, maybe not so easy in practice to accomplish, but okay. Grouping bills and reminder notices. We just talked a lot about reminder notices, but this is the idea of auto enrolling folks in monthly billing. Recall, just for context, that the advanced metering project that we expressed some reservations about in our budget recommendations is could be a fairly instrumental part of implementing monthly billing. So that said, how would folks like to move forward with this recommendation, is there anything more that you would want to say besides we encourage the Bureau to explore the possibility of auto-enrolling people in monthly billing? Saw a hand there. Tom?
Well, I think it would be fine to keep this, asking the Bureau to look at auto enrolling, but it seems that because of the practices over all these decades that people in single family residential gets a quarterly bill, it seems like it would be this. I guess what I'm trying to understand, when that says auto enrolling, is that without asking if the customer wants to do it? Is that just automatically making them do it? Basically, the Water Bureau saying, well, both bureaus saying, okay, we've had enough with quarterly billing. We need to do monthly billing, and then do it as a business practice if that's what they feel they need to do. But I at this time, since we don't have the automated billing system, and we actually have not only reservations, I think our recommendation was to not fund it this coming fiscal year. I just wonder, what we're trying to get at, what we're trying to do, because right now anybody can sign up for monthly billing, which I just did, and so anyway, I'm a little confused.
Okay, I see Gabby and Amy Chumowitz, and I didn't see who was first, but I just wanted to offer that so great points, Tom, and I think that this recommendation about monthly billing, that we had this conversation again last year in 2021, really before we dove into the budget and became a little bit more aware about the AMI system. So yeah, I think this is a little bit dated, and I share your confusion. Let me move to, can I do Gabby and then Amy?
Thank you. Yeah, I think with this recommendation, like previous conversations around making sure that it's multilingual, because I feel like a lot of folks might not know that you could sign up for monthly billing. I know that as a renter, having that quarterly system made it really difficult to pay bill, like especially with like the amount of people that we had in the home. So I definitely feel like making that knowledge available in multiple languages would be very important.
Amy and then Kale.
Thank you. This is Amy Chumowitz, ex officio member from BES. And just a couple of things. The note, there's a connection between monthly billing and the AMI project. I can see that there's a connection, but it doesn't seem like monthly billing is contingent on having AMI. So I think clarifying that might be useful. And then maybe the recommendation is that the Bureau explore more marketing, and especially multilingual marketing about auto enrolling, or no, sorry, not auto enrolling, but about monthly billing. And I'll just add a personal note. Our household, we are on monthly billing. I can't imagine paying a quarterly bill. So I am very grateful that we're on monthly billing. Thanks.
Go ahead, Kale.
I just had a question. So when we are saying just entering it automatically, so when they enroll, does that mean that we are not going to be asking them their preference when we start services? Or is this just like if they're not handling it well, we're just going to convert them to monthly?
So again, with this particular recommendation, what I'm hearing is, you know, it always comes back to communication, right? Monthly billing, I mean, what I'm hearing is that folks are thinking, yeah, monthly bill can't, or in my own experience, or, you know, it seems like that would be a helpful tool to help people manage, manage their expenses and manage their bills. And that, you know, again, we should be doing a better job of letting people know that that's an option. And there are, you know, multitudes of ways that the bureaus can communicate that information, again, broadly and perhaps more, yeah, more targeted, more culturally responsively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's really our recommendation, not so much, you know, enrolling people in a process that they don't know about or maybe don't understand, but just communicating more with folks that this is an option, and letting them know how to do it. Does that sound reasonable? Ponder that, and oh, I saw a hand and then it went away. Okay, so I'm going to look for some thumbs up again if we want to not so much keep this recommendation as it's written there, but more you know, encourage better communications around, or increase communications around monthly billing, taking into account all the good communication practices that we that we talked about in earlier recommendations.
This is Eliza, and I saw a lot of thumbs up for changing this making this recommendation be what you summarized and kind of what Amy Chomowitz summarized, which is about better and multilingual communication and marketing about this option. And I just wanted to add, because I'm receiving some chats from Water Bureau staff with a little bit of technical information. They want to let you know that match funding is only about halfway through, but they're moving through it quickly. So I think that doesn't affect your recommendation, which is you support the funding and you want it to continue. And then they said this is a technical clarification on the monthly billing, which I think, again, doesn't actually change at all your current recommendation on the table, but just so you have the technical details, they want to make sure that you knew that the way there, if somebody signs up for monthly billing right now, what it is a divided bill for the sort of a divided quarterly bill, because what will allow them to do, like, quote, true monthly billing is AMI. So it's sort of like, and I'm not going to make it up, but it's sort of like dividing what is being logged in their system as a quarterly bill, dividing it into a monthly format for the customer. And so I think that's technical and doesn't actually matter to your recommendation here, which is just giving the customer options for how frequently they pay their bill. So those folks who don't want to be surprised by a large quarterly bill have that option.
Yep, that makes sense. Great, thank you. So I'm looking at the clock, and we do need to wrap up here. Is 20 the end? No. No such luck, right? Okay, never mind. So let's, and that's fine. So we will pick up these recommendations, not at our next meeting, and actually we probably won't pick them up again, actually, before our new board joins us, because we have open policy items that we really do need to resolve before some key board members' terms are concluded. So let's see. So yeah, I think we just need to leave this where it is and pick it up again, either with the new board or we may be able to squeeze it in.
This is Eliza, your staff, and
3 meetings. Yeah, go ahead, Eliza.
I was going to make a recommendation which everybody could object to vociferously, but you have had 2 meetings now where you've done a bunch of straw polling, but have yet to take a formal vote to adopt what you straw polled on. And I would strongly encourage you all to take the last little bit of this meeting to go ahead and vote on what you've covered so far so that you've done that work. You don't have to return to that. In fact, I'm going to ask Amy to bring up a proposed motion for you all to consider. That allows you all to move forward. And as Karen had been sharing, these recommendations are either going to be used as talking points for some upcoming work session, which you all will talk about again, or they will be going into a written document, which you will then be reviewing again. So it's more like, the reason I'm suggesting you take a vote today is so that you can sort of have completion on this project for now. And we're going to save this table because financial assistance and billing is a topic the board frequently returns to. So we can bring back the open recommendations at a later date when you next return to it. But it just allows to add to your opus, your body of work on the topic.
I like having an opus.
And so the motion that again you could reject would be to adopt those that you've discussed today, and that you actually have somebody review the previously adopted recommendations just to sync them up. Like some of those will be ones that the Water Bureau and BES have already implemented. So you could, then that recommendation becomes, yay, you implemented it, right? Or it could be a recommendation that was a point in time, in which case you could be like, that's water under the bridge now. So it just allows you to have a live body of recommendations.
And this is Amy. I think the other benefit to that as well is also to keep in mind that the board is always changing. And remember, we're going through recruitment, and some of you will be leaving us at some point in the not too distant future. And so, as the board changes and we come back to these down the road, it then starts to get murky for the new people who are then looking at things that they weren't here, initially crafting these older recommendations. So it kind of helps somehow wrap a little bit of the ones that you've already had a lot of discussion about, and just focus on the ones that you haven't discussed yet.
Karen Spencer.
I may regret proposing this, but would it be better for us to try and extend one of our meeting times so that we can get this completed in full? I do agree about voting on what we've done already, but I feel like every time we drop, it takes that much more time to get back up to what we were thinking about that then. And even if we do it in 2 weeks, we'll still have some of it. But if we have to wait a couple of months, it'll be really bad.
Sure, Karen, thank you. I mean, we can, yes, I think it's a both and. I think we can we can, if we choose to, again, kind of try and tie up what we've done so far with a vote on the recommendations we have discussed. And then we can take a look at the agenda for the next couple meetings. And, absolutely, it's up to the board what you want on your agenda. Yeah, absolutely. Whether or not we need to extend a meeting or not, we could certainly look at putting it on the agenda for work in the next several meetings. It's all a balance. So Tom, you're up.
I agree with Karen, and I would really like to get this done before the current members who are leaving us leave us. And I would like, how many more meetings do we have in the current board form? Is it just one more meeting, or?
We have 3.
3 more meetings, okay.
We have 3.
Right. Yeah, I'd like to see us get this done so that the new people coming in won't have this sort of legacy thing that they have to jump into and try and figure out what are they, where'd this come from, what is it, et cetera. So I would move then, if and maybe it's a little bit early, but I would move that I would move to make the motion as it's written on the screen. If that will help move us along. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
let's go ahead and read it into the record for the recording.
Okay, so I would make the motion to accept these recommendations and amendments which had support as discussed today and at the April 21st meeting and any other meetings, with a review of recommendations previously adopted and amending them as to be determined, I guess would be a word I would prefer to use, and final proofing and grammar edits to be completed by pub staff and hopefully some pub member volunteers. And that, yeah, so I make that motion.
I second that motion.
Seconded by Julia. Thank you very much. Before we move to public comment, is there any discussion on that motion among the board members, voting board members? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment on that motion? Public comment before we vote on that motion. Seeing no public comment, move to a vote. Karen Williams, co-chair, voting member, voting yes.
This is Kaliska Day, co-chair, voting member. I vote yes.
And Teresa had to leave early, so it goes to Karen Spencer.
Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Robin Castro, voting member. I vote yes.
Sorry, Julia DeGraw, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Kale, voting member. I vote yes also.
Hi, Gabriela Saldaña, voting yes.
Motion passes. Thanks, everyone. Excuse me, on that note, we have a couple of wrap-up items.
I think we should just skip to the
Just
next
go to the
meeting.
agenda. Okay.
And I will say that I will follow up, not with a doodle poll, because those have gotten really unpleasant to do, but I'm just going to send everybody an email saying, asking your availability for a meeting extension on one of our next 3 meetings, because I actually do think to give the richness of the work that Julia with the support of Sarah have been doing on the lead hazard reduction program and lead abatement in general, and then the richness of the work that Teresa and Karen Spencer have been doing on workforce racial equity. You don't want to shortchange those discussions either. So realistically, and there's a little bit of board business as well, because you're going to have to review the recommended appointees. So we'll see if we can extend the meeting, and I'll send it out to you all tomorrow.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Eliza. Okay, well, in that case, let's just a preview of our next meeting, which Eliza really just read off what we're mostly going to be talking about. And depending on how the poll comes out, we may extend the May 19th meeting to pick back up some of our financial assistance discussions we were having, or that may be at one of our 2 meetings in June. And please remember other topics that we very much want to cover before the close of this board is the discussions on the data and information that Teresa Huang and Karen Y. Spencer have been collecting and analyzing, and will be bringing us their insights and thoughts and recommendations on workforce environment and equity issues. So that's something that I'm sure will be a very rich discussion, and I'm looking forward to. And yeah, I think any other closing thoughts from board members before I see Tom's hand before we adjourn? Go ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to mention real quick that I've been looking at the rate study, and I've prepared, so far I prepared 5 questions that I sent through Amy and Eliza and asked if those would also be shared with all of you. And as I prepare more, I will send them through, and then hope. Did you receive those, Amy and Eliza?
Yes, I just saw them today.
Okay, great, great.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Tom. yeah, again, thanks for your work diving into that pretty gnarly document.
It's really gnarly.
All right, well, thanks everyone. It was a pleasure working with you this afternoon. Grab some sun. It looks like we have a few minutes of it at least, and we will see you in a couple of weeks.